thundering chords.
Yeah. Usually in the audience, I have people that are aspiring to be writers, and I always like to share lesson learned, a big lesson learned, because this book, Swan Weight, I published this in, I think it was 2004 or 5, I can't remember. But this was before you would do self-publishing, because people didn't like that. People were self-publishing with a lot of typos, and you know, you got the reputation that it wasn't quality work if you self-published. And about a year after I published this, that went away. Swan Weight, my goal was to have a beautiful book, and what a crock, because I got so carried away with having a beautiful book that I spent $12,000. I had to have the beautiful pages. You know, I wanted everyone to really appreciate this book. And what happened was, people would thumb through the book and say, oh, this is a great coffee table book, and didn't even read the content. So that was a really bad mistake. Swan Weight is dear to my heart, because having been born and raised here, we never had swans during my era. During the 50s, there were no swans. And all of a sudden, when we moved into our house, there were swans coming to our dock. And they were very, very smart. And I could talk to them, and I named them, and they would come every day, and I would feed them. And it just kind of took over my husband's and my life. We just loved our swans. We had names for them, and every day we spent with the swans. And in February is when they mate. And so all these photographs my husband and I took. He did the one on the front. And then after they made it, they stopped coming. So 2 months passed before the swans visited us. And I talk about it in April. Marcia, that's what we had named the female, appeared at our dock alone. And here I was so upset. You know, I didn't know if Duke had been killed by a fox or a young male swan that wanted to make Owl Creek his home, because they're very territorial and they won't allow other swans to come into their territory. And she ate the bread I offered, but her dark eyes followed my voice, and I kept repeating, Marcia, please, please send Duke to me so I will know he's okay. And watching her swim away, I called out, Marcia, please bring the newborn Cygnus to visit. So in the afternoon of that day, Duke appeared, and he was wearing a coat of mud over his white feathers. He had been nest building. And I fed Duke, but he didn't stay long, and his eyes seemed to glare at me, communicating the importance of his visit. He and Marcia were teaching us swan life, and they really were. So on Mother's Day, she came with all her little babies, and the water was so rough, and they were just bobbing, and she brought them all to us. Over the next few months, we learned a lot more about swans, and they are the best parents you could ever imagine, because at the end of the season, which is usually around October, they drive their babies away, and they never see them again. They're not allowed to come back. And they have taught them everything. They've just, you know, really been into taking care of them, and teaching them how to eat and everything. You see all that, and then suddenly, no, they're snapping at them, and they don't want them to get the bread. They want them to find their own food. So we just learned so much about these guys, and it was really heartbreaking. And I captured all of that and, you know, what happened with the swans. And then after that, about a year later, the the lot across the street was built on, and all the noise just drove them away. So I live on Indian Creek, and they ended up going out more to the bay. So that's my story on the swans. The second book I published was this one, which is Local Color, and it seems to be a real favorite because it talks about the way it was having grown up here in the 50s, and I was born and raised in Ditchley. And I have a connection to Ditchley House because my great-grandmother owned Ditchley House, and we're direct descendants of the Lees, which was never talked about when I was a child. You didn't get into that. It was, you know, no one talked about the DAR or any of these organizations that that relate to your heritage. So we sold, or my great-grandmother passed away, and the Ditchley House was sold to Mrs. DuPont, and it sold for $18,000. And then, and she was a very, very good businesswoman. She sent a stranger to the house to make the deal. We didn't even know who was actually buying it until the family was presented with a check. But to me, community is composed of the people that are in it. And it's the characters, and that's why I call it Local Color. And I've got stories in here about many of the people that I grew up with that were very influential in our lives. And I have a section on ballroom dancing. Our ballroom dancing instructor had a problem with alcohol, so she was drunk every week. And the parents, the mothers sitting along the sidelines, never caught on because they were so busy chatting with each other. And we could smell the alcohol, and she had a boyfriend, and you know, I talk about that, but they were all really good memories. In fact, I know that when I got old enough to leave home, I didn't want to go. I knew that I was sitting in the best place in the world, and I just want to stay there forever. This was like, you know, why should I grow up? I don't need that. And then my third book.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Is Ditchley House the same one where Ditchley Cider Works is?
Yeah,
oh.
It is. And I went on a tour because I have a cousin that came down from Boston to attend the Lee Society. And I have to say that they have done just a tremendous job in preserving, not changing anything. And Kathy is just one of the brightest, most knowledgeable people I've ever known that knew all about the different kinds of stains that go on the floor. And what she did was, because my grandfather was an architect and an engineer, I guess, but he was hired by Mrs. DuPont to add the second wing to the house. And he was also, did the renovations, so he brought in the electricity and the plumbing and all of that. And she took me on a tour and showed me how his work had actually preserved the house, because he had used copper and all the things that he did that really no one was living in the house, but it has stood the test of time. And she had even gone to up to Delaware and gotten the plans that has his signature on it and has that on the wall. So here I am, 70-something at the time, and I'm like, I can't believe that. I never appreciated his work until that day when she took me on that tour. That's when it suddenly hit me, you know, how brilliant it was. The third book that I didn't do it, Cowboy did it. It's called How Cowboy Found His Forever Home. And as you know, Terry Dorn here is the president of the Northern Egg Partners and Pets, and I'm on the board. And this I wanted to be a contribution to them. So any books that we sell of this, the entire $15 goes directly to Northern Neck Partners and Pets. Cowboy, I'll read to you what he said. My name is Cowboy. It wasn't always Cowboy. It was Dylan for a long time. How it got changed is what this story is about. I am a beagle. I was born into a litter somewhere in the Northern Neck of Virginia. I grew up with other beagles and learned to hunt. I am a hound. My nose is my guide through life. I am never happier than when I am following an interesting scent. We hunted rabbits with our human when we got older. I lived in a pen with other beagles. We were outside no matter what the weather. Hot, cold, rain, snow, you name it. We saw it. Beagles, if I do say so myself, are great dogs. But because we are hounds, we can be stubborn and require patient, creative training techniques. I remember the last time I hunted with my pack. We were chasing a rabbit. I stepped into a hole and hurt my leg. No one picked me up. Instead, when my human saw I could not keep up with the other dogs, he went on and left me behind. I thought he would come back when they had finished their run. He didn't. I hung around the spot for a couple of days. I really thought he would come for me. Finally, I gave up, hungry and injured. I tried to walk and hunt for food. I found a trash can with the garbage and some food scraps. The pickings were slim. So this is his story, and it's how I found him. And he lives with me today with the others. He's part of the pack at home. So he's just a wonderful pet, and I can tell you that the situation with those 4,000 beagles being rescued is really, it's really hit close home, because I can relate to what they're going through having him. The beagles really are great pets, and I can say that we're very hopeful that we're going to get this shelter built. Our shelter will be part of the community. We want the Northern Neck community to be a no-kill community. We want to offer homes for all these dogs and cats, and we're going to have a policy that if someone passes away or they get sick or whatever, we will take your animal. And if it's so that we can find a home for it, we will. Otherwise, it will live with us. So that's what our project is all about. And we're working with all the other counties to make this come true, because in Lancaster County in particular, we're not really good with the animals. There are a lot of animals. In hunting season, you see them, and you know, these beagles are trained not by human boards. They're trained with a whistle. And I have tried in many winters to pick up one, and you can't. They won't come to you, because they have no contact with humans most of the time when they're in those pens. And we're happy to receive donations, and we're going to be having more events up at our property. We've got 37 acres. It's on Devil's Bottom Road. We have built a pavilion, and right now we've got the Northern Neck Kennel Club as one of our partners, and they've been holding classes up there. But we hope to make that a place that draws the community. We want to have community events there, and we want to get our shelter built. So, and
I
I'm
have
sure.
copies of the Chesapeake Style with a couple of articles about that.
Yeah, I had some great articles. Okay, the last book that I wrote, and I will say these last 3 books were published by High Times over in Deltaville. Jeannie is a great publisher, and she specializes in over 50 and over people that write, and it's a system where you get royalties. So it's a much better system than when I had swanky published. So Fix It, I wrote as a dedicated to caregivers everywhere. Some of us have been through this as a caregiver, and my journey was for 5 years. my husband was sick, he had a stroke, and as I went on this journey, I realized that, you know, it's so hard because the person that you love changes, not just physically, but mentally. And this change is not a good change. I mean, maybe there are exceptions, but I had an extremely smart engineer husband, and so he questioned everything in life. And we had a really good 32 years together, but when he got sick, it was like anger. He was very angry that he couldn't do the things that he used to do, and it was very difficult. And being a fixer, I thought that I could fix everything, like I always have been able to fix everything. So why couldn't I fix this issue? So, so one of the things was a weekend escape that we took, and we went down to Nag's Head, and it turned into absolutely disaster. He, I didn't realize how bad his Alzheimer's was, and he just could not, you couldn't reason with him. And I talk about it in this book, my experiences, and it's really, I think this is the strongest writing I've ever done, but it's also very emotional. And it's, Jeannie told me that she couldn't believe that I had laid everything out like I did, but I felt that the people had to understand. And what happened with this book was I was keeping notes, and I can say life returns to normal. This is one of the chapters. What is normal? For me, it was living with a person who made no effort to improve his quality of life. You are in charge. Those are the words I heard every day. We had been back home for 3 weeks, and this is when we had gone to New Orleans. Bill instantly returned to his old ways, staying in bed till noon, treating me like the hired help. What do you have for breakfast? He would ask each morning, and each morning I would read off the list: fruit, cereal, oatmeal, bagel, raisin bread, yogurt, pastry, eggs, bacon. And his response: no, I'm not hungry, just forget it. Sometimes I did, other times I went to town and got him a croissant from Carried Away Cuisine. Several times a day I reminded myself that he was sick, but those who are sick only think about themselves and their needs. They don't realize that caregivers have needs and feelings too. It was hard to adapt to his attitude. How did I react to his helpless attitude? One day I woke up with pink blotches all over my face. I went to the doctor, who said the condition was caused by stress. He put me on an antibiotic and gave me a prescription for an ointment, just what I needed, more medicine, and something else added to my schedule. A short time afterward, Bill had a doctor's appointment. The doctor told him that overall he saw significant improvements. Bill's speech had improved, cognitively he was better, and he was even walking better. The mental problems had been brought on by a stroke that he had, so he had brain damage. Once we were home, Bill said, I'm a sick man, and no one understands that. I'm stopping all medications. And he stopped his AM meds and said he wanted to go off the PM meds too. He ended the intake of 9 pills a day without any adverse effects. We did talk to the doctor, who told us Bill's prescriptions were only for prevention. While that made Bill happy, I became fearful of him dying. But in truth, Bill's mind became more clear. Now he was happy to stay in bed, get up for dinner, sit at the table while looking over the creek. During this time, he insisted all lights be turned off during the day and began yelling if he had left one on. This was his way of being in control. because he couldn't be in control of what was happening to his body. So he had to control something. He tried to control the environment, and he tried to control me. Survival as a caregiver is dependent on being so busy that you have no time to think. I must have made 30 trips a day to and from the master bedroom or Bill's chair in the living room. My thoughts were always, is he awake? If so, I need to take him his coffee and his glass of half and half. Does he need changing? Has he made a mess in the bed? Then I would turn on the TV for him and struggle, given my technological shortcomings, to get the settings out of the Netflix mode and into the local TV. This was before streaming. Most days, he didn't get out of bed and dressed until 11:30. But once Bill was awake, he was content if I agreed to stay in bed and watch TV with him. If I said no, he just pouted like a little boy, and his body language clearly demonstrated his unhappiness. So as a caregiver, it was important to have balance in my life, ensuring my husband was taken care of and that I too had some enjoyment. When I visited the doctor, I complained about being old. His response was, "You aren't old. Bill is making you feel old. You must have some freedom from caregiving. Forget about how selfish it makes you feel." And he was right. I had a difficult time living up to the commitment of full-time caregiving, and I too recognized that to keep myself energized, I needed to define a separate life for myself. It was all about balance. And I go on in the book to describe the situations that we had and how I became a difficult person because I was so angry at not being able to control the situation. But I also did a chapter on the kinds of devices and little things that I had learned that helped me cope with the situation. And then my doctor came and said, oh, and in the book also, I have a list of possible fixes. So I've listed everything for people. But one day I was there in the doctor's office and he said, you can't keep going like this. You're taking care of him, and if we don't do something, you're not going to be here to take care of him. So that was on a Friday. He came to my house that Saturday morning and went in, and I could overhear him talking to Bill, and he said, "Do you love her?" And he said, "Oh yes, I love her so much." And he said, "Well then, you have to be willing to have someone come here and help, because she can't keep doing this." And so that was when we got Hospice of Virginia, and they were wonderful. And I can say that the nurse that we had not only took care of Bill, but she took care of me. And she understood that I didn't want frosting on the situation. I wanted the facts. I wanted to know exactly what was happening and when it was happening. I just did not deal well with a fantasy of hoping that everything would be fine, because I knew that everything was not going to be fine. And that was why I dedicated this book to caregivers, because I think if you haven't had it happen to you, if you read this book, it might help you prepare mentally for what you might be facing. And if you have been a caregiver, then you can read this book and say, "Gosh, I wasn't crazy. It was just what was happening."
I've got to say, everything you say rings so true. In my father-in-law and mother-in-law's case, it was reversed. My mother-in-law slowly crippled badly by rheumatoid arthritis. But, like I said, everything you said, you nailed it. So.
Well, last night I was reading it, and I have to tell you it was very hard to go back and reread what I had published, because I didn't soften anything, and that was what Jeannie said. It is so blunt that she made me write a postscript about my relationship with my husband, because she said, if someone reads this, just this part, When they're gonna think you are a really mean person. I said, no, I didn't want that. But anyway, that is why I wrote Fix It. And
Can you read us the postscript?
the postscript,
Yeah.
sure. You feel better about me? Oh, I don't know, postscript's very long. It's about 6 pages.
Oh.
I'll just leave you a copy and you can read it. But,
When did you start writing this? Well, you probably didn't have time to. Did you start writing it even in your head while Bill was still with you?
yeah,
And you didn't do it till after he was gone?
right, yeah. Yes, I did. And so, here's one thing I did say. I could say it must be getting through the first year that wears on a widow's soul, but that is not true. The problems never stop coming. There are always things in the house that break, need to be repaired or replaced. Some widows are left with financial worries and health concerns that last far beyond a year. And he passed away in 2019. And 2020 will be remembered by everyone as a year we struggled to stay safe by wearing masks and limiting our socialization. It's particularly hard for those of us who were used to total freedom. I used to say, God never gives us more than we can handle. And then I said, well, God, please don't forget, I'm not as young as I used to be, and therefore it takes me longer to get things done. I'm appealing to you to give me a break. I am very thankful for all my blessings, and including my good health, but I would be grateful for a vacation from all this stress. God bless all, especially those of you who can relate to my caregiving journey. And so he passed away in November the 5th, and then COVID, we got through Christmas, but then COVID came, and then that was 2 more years I felt that were taken away from me, and I could not use those 2 years to, I wrote this book, but this was the fastest book I ever put together, because I think I had just been living it so much, I didn't have to really draw so much on memory, so that's why I wrote this book. And that's it.
Thank you very much.
Well, you know that we are recording your presentation. So normally I'm going to review the video and edit, and I send you the original for you guys to use. Okay?
And let's